The Formula 1 paddock is at war with itself. Swipes from Racing Point's rivals have escalated into something far more serious, and now a grid that was more unified than ever during a global crisis has broken up into factions again. A controversial legal challenge has triggered bitter responses, big accusations are starting to surface, and in the background of all of this, F1's desperately trying, and so far failing, to get all 10 teams to sign up to continue racing in 2021 and beyond. These are spicy days in a very difficult F1 season, and the consequences could be wide-ranging, so make sure you're subscribed to the race to stay up to date with how everything we discuss in this video plays out. Now let's assess how some mudslinging and bickering has erupted into Formula 1 civil war. During the 70th Anniversary Grand Prix weekend, Mercedes Formula 1 boss Toto Wolff hit out at a little revolution of teams forming against Racing Point because he says rivals are upset they lack the same level of performance. In the long-running dispute of Racing Point's decision to copy Mercedes' title-winning 2019 car design, Renault, McLaren and Ferrari have all complained that the team has taken the usual amount of copying in Formula 1 too far. As you may know, this escalated into a very specific legal challenge from Renault about the Racing Point's brake ducts, which Racing Point has lost. You can check out this video for a proper explainer of that saga, but the bottom line is the team has been fined €400,000 and docked 15 Constructors' Championship points for illegally developing the parts using Mercedes data, but it gets to keep them for the rest of the season. This is one source of the division. Racing Point said it would appeal the verdict to protest its innocence, but Ferrari and Renault also intend to appeal to push for a harsher punishment, and their positions were shared by Mercedes engine customer Williams and Mercedes soon-to-be engine customer McLaren. In short, these teams want more blood. Renault has argued that when it was found to have breached a sporting regulation last year, it was disqualified from the race in question and made to stop using the offending technology. McLaren and Williams say it is confusing that Racing Point's allowed to keep using a part deemed to have been developed illegally, and that it sends a bad message within the paddock and to fans outside. McLaren Racing CEO Zak Brown even went as far to say, "They were docked because of the unfair competitive advantage they had in Austria, but aren't they still carrying that unfair advantage?" And Williams' deputy team principal Claire Williams has pointed to wider implications of the ruling. While one could not reasonably argue that the difference between the RP20, at times the second fastest car on the grid, and the car produced by the pointless Williams team is in the brake ducts alone, it does add up to a package that will likely outscore most, if not all, of its midfield rivals this year. A 15-point deduction will not offset that alone, and the €400,000 fine will be easily outweighed by a higher finishing position in the Constructors' Championship. But Racing Point's rivals are not just irate over the penalty. This issue has swirled for months, and the brake ducts protest was essentially the legal manifestation of frustration over Racing Point's wider car philosophy and copying Mercedes' 2019 design. The other teams have never believed Racing Point's story that the principal job of copying the 2019 Merc was done through extensive photography. Brown was particularly vocal about this, claiming that the steward's verdict proves that this is, quote, BS. This isn't strictly true because the verdict itself makes no connection at all to the wider RP20 concept. What McLaren's saying, and Ferrari as well, is that Racing Point never said they'd bought brake ducts and used them to influence their 2020 design, so what else have they kept secret? They consider this a smoking gun, and are making more and more noises about a potentially unlawful collaboration between Racing Point and Mercedes. This is a very serious allegation, and has not yet been explicitly made, let alone acted upon. The FAA has also called the Racing Point issue with the brake ducts unprecedented because those components are the first to transition from being a non-listed part to a listed part. There is also no evidence that beyond the legal acquisition of brake ducts last year, when they were non-listed parts, Racing Point received anything at all from Mercedes, let alone something it shouldn't. You can see why Mercedes is unhappy about where it's being implicated in this whole saga. It got dragged into the protest itself because of its position as the supplier of Racing Point's physical components and CAD data in 2018 and 2019 when that was legal and its own parts were impounded for comparison. The only hint of Mercedes' wrongdoing from the FIA was a transfer of parts in early January, but this was considered immaterial because it related to 2019 components that had already been made available legally last year. Wolff has slammed the notion that Mercedes has acted improperly in any way. He's questioned what benefit Mercedes should seek to gain from taking such a big risk and said it's something that the other teams have made up in their minds. According to Wolff, Mercedes is not facing scrutiny from the chiefs at Daimler over the matter because he says that obviously our reputation is important, but it is intact. But Wolff has goaded rivals into action and blowing up the matter even further by saying they should protest his team if they believe there has been illegal cooperation with Racing Point because he says they're happy to go to court. In addition to this, Wolff has leapt to defence of Racing Point, although some take that with a pinch of salt given he is on very good terms with team chairman Lawrence Stroll. Their relationship means Wolff has become an investor in Aston Martin, the car manufacturer that Stroll's in charge of, and will take over Racing Point's branding and make it the Aston Works team from 2021. Wolff insists that the International Court of Appeal will likely view the case differently and side with the Mercedes customer team, so he's come down clearly on the side of Racing Point. In what looked like a bizarre homage to a hostage video, Racing Point majority shareholder Lawrence Stroll made a very rare foray in front of the camera to read a scripted statement in which he said he is appalled by the poor sportsmanship from the team's rivals. Stroll took aim at Racing Point's competitors and the governing body for how it has handled the matter and declared that, quote, "My integrity and that of my team are beyond question." Well, that's not true because nobody's integrity is beyond question, otherwise due process and checks and balances wouldn't be necessary. And, as it happens, Racing Point has been investigated and has been found guilty of illegally developing a component. But moving on from that curious choice of language, Stroll says he's shocked and disappointed by the ruling and lashed out at rivals for dragging our name through the mud. His broadside at the FIA questioned the absence of specific guidance or clarification over the transition of brake ducts from one classification to another, and he said he was shocked to see the FIA introduce a new grandfather clause which had never previously existed. The grandfather clause is a reference to how the FIA determined that the rear brake ducts were illegal but the front brake ducts weren't, and relates to how the FIA viewed Racing Point used the information that it gained from Mercedes last year. Stroll has pledged to pursue every avenue to clear his and the team's name, confirming two things. The FIA has made a wealthy and angry enemy, and Stroll's taken this extremely personally. The division of the teams over Racing Point comes at a time when F1 is trying to get everybody to sign a new Concorde agreement, which will define the terms under which the teams commit to Formula 1 for the next 5 years. F1's set a deadline of August 12th to get this done, but Wolff has given his clearest indication yet that Mercedes is unwilling to sign under the terms on offer, and the only other team boss to suggest this date isn't achievable is Otmar Szafnauer, who runs Racing Point. But Mercedes is out on a limb with Ferrari, Red Bull, McLaren and Williams all on record as saying they are ready to sign. The general outline of an agreement is understood to have been in place since the latter half of last year and features a considerable redistribution of income between the teams. It's been realigned from the bigger teams to the smaller one, but it still recognises Ferrari's unique global profile and its importance to the history of Formula 1. Wolff accepts the redistribution to the smaller teams but is clearly unhappy that Mercedes' own standing relative to Ferrari is not being recognised. Basically, only Ferrari will get a special payment from 2021 onwards, and Wolff feels Mercedes is being unfairly treated. He's even gone as far as saying that Mercedes is the biggest victim of this shake-up. The Racing Point saga and the Concorde agreement might be completely reconcilable and totally independent of one another, but in reality the pursuit of Mercedes and its customer team from the likes of Ferrari and others is only going to add to the bad blood between F1's biggest manufacturers at a time when F1 is seeking unity. So that's about as comprehensive a look into F1's dissension into civil war as we can manage in around 10 minutes. What do you think? A lot of fuss about nothing, or fundamental disagreement over potentially future defining issues? All the teams are having their say and sticking their noses in, so make sure you wade in as well in the comments below. If you think we've done a good job explaining why this is so controversial, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to our channel as well to join us for future videos. Unlike the F1 paddock, we're a happy community here and the more the merrier.